what's going on, guys? Brandon here with Texas Revving, and I'm finally making a video comparing the GT350 and GT350R. Mostly, I want to talk about, is it worth it? And the answer is, right away, yes and no. It just depends. The difference with these two cars, though, is that one is a 2017 and one's a 2020. That alone can probably justify its own video on the differences between the different model years. So I'll summarize it pretty quickly, and I really want to lean towards more so impressions. I will tell you guys things that you can read about online, just matter of fact, spec stuff as well. But just the difference between owning these two. What have I noticed from the different model years? I'll talk about what I've done to the vehicles as well, because that's important to distinguish. And then from then on, we'll talk about just the matter of fact, what are the differences with a 350 and a 350R. Then we'll go ahead and drive each one and talk about impressions. So that's how the video is gonna get broken down. Let's go ahead out here and see what they're about. Here we are. So like I said, I wanna break the video down, starting off with some of the differences. This one right here being the 2017 GT350, and this here being the 2020 GT350R. Now forget the difference between R and non-R. The difference between these model years anyway, there's a couple ones. We'll start with some of the obvious cosmetic ones. Starting at the back, I say obvious, but I guess this lighting doesn't really show it too well. But the 2019 and 2020 GT350s and 350Rs had darker taillights. You see like the more defined three streaks there that kind of pop out in the darker lens. Compare that to this, for instance. That kind of shows it pretty decently. But yeah, all the 19s and 20s were a little darker. Also, this black trunk lid here had no line in it, no interruption, just the badge right there. And the 19s and 20s had a line across it. Going down here, I don't know what year they changed this, but we went from having a little bubble mirror here to a blind spot little light. On the earlier 350s, it was a drilled brake rotor. And then they stayed with the same size, but it was not drilled, and it was just a flat brake rotor towards the end. On the earlier 350s, some people had complained about the clutch feel in that it's kind of a two-stage in a way. Some people didn't like that, and they would change out the clutch spring. Well, at some point, Ford just went ahead and did that too. So the later ones, the clutch is way more linear. The grab point's pretty similar, but there's just no obvious like jump of when it's gonna grab. So I don't know. I think a lot of people, if I had to guess, they prefer the linear clutch feel, but I actually kind of don't care. I'll go back and forth between these two and get used to it very, very easily. Last thing I'll say between the model year differences is that the earlier 350s were known to have more aggressive tram lining. So just for example, if there's like some kind of imperfections in the road to where the road grooves go off to the right, you're kind of fighting the car to go back left. Now, I don't want you to think that having one of these, you're constantly just battling the steering wheel. It's not by any means what's going on. It's just every now and then you'll be on the highway or whatever, there's some road imperfections, and you just have to hold the steering wheel pretty tight because the car wants to move a little bit more towards the road imperfections. I heard that somewhere down the line, they tuned the steering to get rid of tram lining, and I am here to say it's absolutely true. It never bothered me, I'm trying to say, but then I drive the same roads that I drive with this, with the new 2020, and there's, I'm not joking, zero, or at least very, very minimal tram lining. The thing is not darting left and right like crazy. It's actually holding dead straight without making the steering feel muted at all. So anyway, long story short, tram lining very much improved on the later years. Quick little disclosure, just so you guys understand what's been done to the cars here. The 2017 has got a different exhaust from factory. It's a Borla, but also co-designed and developed with Ford Performance. So on the bottom of the mufflers, it does say Ford Performance. So it was like within their catalog of performance parts from Ford, but done by Borla. What that did was get rid of the resonators as well, and it does have quite a bit of rasp to it. I actually like the exhaust quite a bit. And this right here is stock. Both of them have the Grimspeed exhaust valve simulators to where the exhaust valves stay open all the time. But when we drive them later and all that stuff, and at the beginning when I started them up, just know that right here is a Borla / Ford Performance exhaust, and this one's stock. All right, so that covers some of the differences between earlier to mid 350s and the later 350s, just between feeling of impressions and things I read about online to confirm. And then what I did to this exhaust. Now we'll go ahead and get into some of the things that you may already know, but these are just the things that are different between all the model years from 15 to 2020, between a 350 and a 350R. So let's go ahead and run through it. First one, of course, being the carbon fiber wheels that the 350R has. All four corners got these carbon fiber wheels, and they save about 13 pounds per wheel, which would be 52 pounds overall. Now, saving 13 pounds per corner in itself is pretty impressive, but then when you consider that it's unsprung rotating mass, it really exaggerates it to where it's more so like, I don't know, over 100 pounds of weight savings. The wing design with the 350 changed throughout the years. The earlier ones did not have a track pack, and then that became standard in 2017. So this was the track pack wing. And then the later ones, I think it was maybe 2018, or if I'm not mistaken, 2019 and 20s, had a more GT500 designed wing. Whereas from 2015 all the way to 2020s, the R's had this carbon fiber wing, whereas the other wings are not made out of carbon fiber. These ones have like this little, not quite a halo, but this like loop design. Very, very cool. And you don't realize it until you see it in person, just how aggressive that lip is. In this angle, it looks pretty narrow, but then from angles like this, you just realize how much it like lips up, and not until you drive it and you look back, you realize it kind of blocks a decent amount of visibility. Continuing on with the Aero, we have a more aggressive front splitter on the R's. You can kind of see here, a little bit more squared off. Versus on the 350, it rounds off quite a bit more as well. So this fender here is the exact same on the 350, just like right here. But whereas this kind of chin kind of tucks up here, this one, like I said, sticks out quite a bit further. Now, as far as tires from the factory, the width on the 350 from the front is 295 and 305 to the rear. And then that is 305 and 315 to the rear on the R's. I will say though, all the R's came with Cup 2 tires, and then the earlier 350s did not. I think it was 2019 plus they started coming with the Cup 2s. As of right now, this car is fitted with Cup 2s that are, to be honest, kind of worn out, and I'm needing to replace them pretty soon. And I bought this one with 4S's that are in good health, but I would rather have Cup 2s on the R. So that's the tire situation right now. I thought I'd explain that. But from the factory, like I said, much wider tires on the R. The R's have a lot of red accenting, like on the badging on the front and back here, versus the 350s actually have like a really cool smoked gunmetal one as well, front and back. The only time you'll see an R without the red badge was on the Heritage, and it was like a light blue badge. Continuing on with the red accents, we got red brake calipers on the R versus black brake calipers on all the 350s. If you option in stripes on a standard 350, if they were light stripes, you would get black pinstripes, or vice versa. If they were black, you'd get white. On the later ones, it was like a gunmetal finish on the pinstriping, versus all the 350Rs with stripes got red, whether it was black stripes, white stripes, you always got the red pinstriping. Those red accents continue on the inside as well. Opening it up here. My buddy told me that this car kind of looks like a watermelon, and I like that. It's kind of funny. But yeah, a lot of black here. These are aftermarket, licensed by Shelby and whatever. But I thought that kind of tied it in. But otherwise, these are the factory seats. Got the R badge on the seats. But yeah, just a lot of red accents. You got the 12 o'clock marker in red, only on the R's. And taking a look at the back, there are no seats on the R's. Opening up the 350, we have got more of a darker interior. The only red accents really are the start button on the earlier ones, and then the shifter is the exact same. This does have rear seats, but I could fold them down, and that's what I did here. So for functionality, you could put larger objects back here, but I folded it down just because I could hear more exhaust. No other mature reason, that's about it. But again, the R's either have an R badge here or here, versus all the 350s say GT350 right here. So little difference in the interior as well. As you can see, both of them had the Recaro seats, but that was an option on the 350 versus standard equipment on the R. Once you go to the R as well, the steering and the suspension tuning is quite a bit different to optimize it for the R. Both the carbon fiber wheels and the different tires that they get fitted with. Like I already mentioned, the 350 currently is a resonator delete, just because I deleted the resonator from factory, but the R's actually do not come with a resonator from factory as well. But it just makes the car a little bit more talkative with the pops and cracks and all that burbling coming downhill in gear, like all that stuff. I rode in a 350 without the resonators one time, and I knew I had to do it as well. But it's a little bit more talkative. Now, they sound great with the resonators, don't get me wrong. But yeah, now currently they're both resonator delete, but the R's came that way. And the last difference that I wrote down between an R and non-R is that the GT350R actually sits about a ½ inch lower, which, I mean, honestly, from the naked eye is gonna be kind of hard to pick up. As far as total production numbers, that's another interesting thing to make note of. So again, they made them from 2015 to 2020 was the last year, and they ended up making 20,564 of the 350s, and then 3,647 of the 350Rs. Going to the R is not worth it by any means. Love the R. If you're dead set on the R, you will not be disappointed. I will not talk you out of going to the R. But like many things, it's like diminishing returns. What is the specialty with the 350 and 350R? And that would be, the big one is being the engine. And you get that with all the 350s. That's the 5.2 liter flat plane crank V8 that revs to over 8,200 RPM. I didn't even mention that yet in the video until now, because I assume maybe some people would already know that, but it's definitely worth mentioning. This car sings because of that engine. If it didn't have this engine, if it had a Coyote, we would have forgot about it by now. Maybe not forgot, but they would have been had for the low 30s. They would have depreciated a good amount. But the engine's not in production anymore, and that's why the cars are strong and still something very much so worth looking into in the year 2025. In addition to that, the transmission, the Tremec 6-speed manual, is an awesome transmission, and those two made up really, really nicely. That engine, that transmission is just such a nice recipe. And of course, that's part of the standard GT350. This having the track pack, and like I said, track pack became standard in 2017, has a magnetic ride control. That's another big thing that the 350 was known for, was the first Mustang with magnetic ride control. So foreign at the time, really. And you get that all with this car. I will say the ground clearance between the two cars isn't drastically different, but the approach angle changes a lot, just because although the R is only lower by a little bit, that chin splitter sticks out so far to where it definitely changes what you can and can't go over and the angles you have to take them at. That being said, I was told so many times just how much a 350R scrapes. I've known people with 350Rs, and I just heard all the stories. They scrape all the time. I'm glad to report it's not as bad as I thought. My driveway is not the friendliest driveway, and I actually barely scraped it when I was trying to be too careful. When I went at the same angle I take all the other cars, I actually did not scrape at all, so that's good news. The other thing with that functionality and daily usability is the rear seats. Being folded, you can see how important that is to me. Not very, it's not my only car anymore, but this car was my daily driver for a solid year in 2017. It was the only car I had. So if you need rear seats, then there you go. You can put rear seats back into an R. There's just a little process to that, not too big of a deal. I know people have done that. Same with GT500 track packs. People have added the rear seats back to those. Oh shit, a Raptor R, that's badass. All right, we're just car spotting in the 350. If you don't want the rear seats, but maybe you see yourself putting larger items in your daily driving GT350, folding the seats down and putting larger items definitely is nice too. That's come in handy a couple times. Not too many now that I don't drive the car daily, but yeah, just a matter of how functional is that to you, how much do you want to use that. That being said, we're in the 350, and when I go back and forth between the 350 and 350R, don't get me wrong, the R is just that diminishing return ever so much slightly more exciting. Just a few different reasons. The aesthetics of the R are just that much meaner. The color is ridiculous, so that's that particular car. But when I drive this thing, I don't feel shortchanged whatsoever. Low revs there just because I'm not in an area I could really open it up, but the rev matching, just bombing this thing down a windy road and just shifting more than you need to, it's addicting. Here's a good example. I mean, I've had the car since new, 2017, like I said, and that's coming up on quite a few years now, and I am not bored of it in the slightest. I love it so much, like I said, I bought another 350. I will say this, back in 2016, when I started watching videos on the GT350 and 350Rs initially for the first time, I was kind of under the impression that the difference between 350 and 350R was quite a bit bigger than I realized it is, and that's because it depends who's reviewing it and where they're reviewing it at. Some bummy YouTuber like myself, how much of a difference can I really tell? I'll be the first to admit, I'm not a race car driver. I try to drive within my means, and I just, even then, that doesn't mean I can't enjoy these things. I absolutely enjoy them, but I'm not a race car driver. When I'm watching videos with Randy Probst and all that stuff, you know, driving around Laguna Seca or any racetrack, that's when they really pick up on the differences between a GT350 and an R, and that's where they recommend the R by a decent margin above a 350. But it's 10/10ths at a racetrack, driving really, really hard. That's when they see it. And so then, of course, I drive them and I go, okay, I see a little bit of a difference in the pickup, the cornering, maybe, yes. The margin is a little tighter than you would assume. So the rest of it is just down to cool factor. How many people opt for the super performance version of an already super performance car just because it was the limited run, or just because it's the, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, in the videos where race car drivers are driving on the track, they pick up from the seat of the pants the feeling, the difference between the two cars in their tuning, the way they're set up, and the weight reduction in the wheels, whatever else, and they really love the R. Well, I'm here to say, after driving both, there is a minor difference from a recreational driver like myself driving on the roads. It just means whichever one that you think you want, you're in the right. If you want to save the $25,000 to $40,000 and get a standard 350, you should be very happy. The 350, like I have been saying about my blue one, have not gotten bored of it. Absolutely an exciting car. And in case you guys didn't know, both the R and non-R have the exact same engine, exact same horsepower, at the crank anyway, 526 horsepower. But wheel horsepower, the R is going to show a decent amount more horsepower purely because of the weight reduction in the carbon fiber wheels. Now, how much would it show? I don't know. Maybe there's a dyno out there on YouTube, or someone mentioned it online. So forget that. Let's just talk about the seat of the pants feeling. I notice slightly easier pickup, or maybe it's a placebo, but I just feel like it accelerates just slightly easier, just due to the weight reduction in the carbon fiber wheels. And this car in particular, in Grabber Lime, is just such a fun car to look at and drive. The reactions it gets, I will say, I think an R will typically get just a little bit more reaction for those that know, but otherwise most people probably won't tell a difference. But this specific car in green gets more reactions of any car I've ever owned, more than even the GT500 carbon fiber track pack, but mine is white as well. I think it looks great, but something about this really captures people's attention. This thing could be a hot pink for all it matters. It could be shadow black, doesn't matter. It's just hard to not have a good time in a 350 of any specification. But I guess just know that if you want an R, I won't talk you out of it. I'd say they're worth it. But it is diminishing returns. If you know that, then you're in a good spot to just get the 350. You're not really missing out anything drastic, especially if you're just some weekend warrior who wants to go down a back road. Certainly not. If you're trying to get every last second of track lap times, then yeah, maybe the R, but then I think you should be looking at a different car entirely. It's just gonna come down to personal preference and what you're willing to justify when buying one of these things. That's really it. As far as other, maybe more mundane things, functionality, visibility on both of them are actually pretty darn good. Slightly better in the 350 just because of this wing. I'll try to get a picture, honestly, just with my phone even, of what that rear wing looks like from my perspective. I think I got one. So yeah, not the worst by any means. I could see through it, underneath it and above it. But yeah, in any case, even if it takes away some visibility, it's in a cool way to where I like looking back there and reminding myself, oh yeah, this is the R, pretty cool. Side mirrors, you kind of see like those little loops kind of sharp and sticking off to the sides. Just a cool thing to look out of. Guys, I don't know how conclusive this video really is. I'm just saying that as long as you find a clean one, for sure, that's been cared for, because they're out of production, so you have to go into the used market. But R, non-R, whatever it is, you'll be happy. You'll absolutely be happy. Now, someone out there will absolutely justify a $30,000 to $40,000 premium to get a rarer R, because they'll collect them a little bit, drive them every great now and then, whatever, and they'll justify it, and they're not in the wrong. Someone out there can also save the 30, 40 grand and get a 350 that's been driven but still in great shape, and get 99.9% of the driver experience and just save a lot of money. Well, anyways, guys, I think at this point I'm just rambling and I don't know how to close out a video, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do that. So thanks so much for watching. See you guys next time.